Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's session. My name is Danny, and I'm the event planner for the New York Reactor Space. Before we start, I have a few things to go over. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and on topic. Useful links will be shared in the chat. The session is recorded and will be available on demand 24 to 48 hours on the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. Which brings us to today's session. It'll run for approximately 1 hour with time for questions throughout. I will now turn it over to our speaker for introductions.
My name is James. I work at Orchest as a front lead engineer. Today I'm going to talk about stateful BFFs. Basically, that's backend for frontend. What is it, why it's needed, and how it should be implemented using a conductor, works conductor. Okay, so basically, backend for frontend is a way to abstract the backend complexity. A gateway for the frontend to the backend API. That means it's a way to abstract the flow of your API. So you have the backend here, and a way to abstract the flow of your API in a way which is easy to see, to explain, and to reason. Let's consider a simple processing flow, right? User logs in. Basically, you will have a card, and if you can check whether the card exists or it doesn't. After we create the card, we add the items. And in the process of checkout, we basically check whether he has a credit card or not. We allow to add it, and the order is submitted, right? Where would you store the session of the data, right? How do you retrieve the existing session to start a new session for that card, or do you resume an existing one? And how do you handle when you have multiple users in the flow? Basically, a user needs to approve what another user did or review the card items. Well, by using a flow, you can create a new API for session management, a database to store it, or you can process those abandoned cards and session. That gives you insight information of how that process went, and you can actually see it in the diagram. Aside from just just defining the state, consider the ability to change. Makes it much easier to, given the inside information, to change the diagram, to do some A/B testing, or have a specific flow for a device, canary testing before rolling out. The possibilities of change are within the diagram itself, and you have the data to take that decision. Basically, the backend from frontend will avoid you managing state database for the UI, right? It's self-healing because you can address an exception, an error, with a flow. You have flows that are durable much more than within the UI itself, right? And you don't get to store stuff on the browser. You have a session ID, which will be the execution to the user state, so you know exactly what happened to that user. And you can personalize flows for a specific user. Here it's an example of whether you consider when you consider change by looking at execution, you can just add a step to verify an address. If the user wants to add another verification step, the analytics which you can gather from different executions, and you can add additional steps to review the order, etc. Now we will see a practical example in a bit. Let me show you the practical example. Okay, so for this demo, I did a simple hotel booking site, right? Just to show the simple example of a checkout, right? So imagine this is like a booking site. You have many places where you can book a specific hotel, a specific restaurant. So you can model something as simple as a search, where you can have multiple search repositories, multiple search sites, different hotels providers, right? So each box here represents a single repository of a booking site, right? And I'm able to define this through a flow. Basically, the search comes in with a destination and what's the availability date, right? And it forks the request into different providers, right? You can have many providers, and you can actually see, for example, in the execution, if a provider failed, if it didn't, how long it took for the task to execute. All that is insightful information to take a decision whether this is the path to move forward. You can change the implementation. Say you decide to implement this in a specific language. I don't know, I implemented this one in JavaScript, but I could have implemented this in Clojure, in Java, Python, in Golang. You have here examples on how to do that. It's just an input comes in, out. You process and you send an output, and you get to connect the different results. The state of the workflow itself is handled within the context of the workflow. So for each workflow, you have your inputs, your outputs, your variables, right? So you can handle, you're basically handling the state within the flow itself. So I'm picking a origin, a destination, just a date. This is just a simple UI I did for this demo, so I didn't really, there. And it generates lorem ipsum. Now I'm going to tell you how this was implemented and the code for it. But basically, here I made a search, right? This is the last search. Here you can see the Ecuador was the destination, from where, and it supposedly hit the different providers, hotel providers, right? So the user is unaware, like the whole backend is defined in a flow that you can see, that you can present, that you can reason. And the user clicks book, right? When the booking starts, it's the same as the checkout that I was presenting earlier, meaning another execution is spawned. here's the checkout process. I added a human task. A human task is a special task in Conductor that allows you to define a form done here in the fields. I'll show you in a second. And it waits for a human interaction. Basically, here you can see who this form is assigned to, who the user is. Here, it's an external user. This is the logged in user is hard-coded. It's built in Next, so the backend is in JavaScript. It's just a middleware for this whole flow. If we go to the definition, we can see that this is assigned to a user that is called in the work as a workflow input, right? It is using this UI template, and it expects these parameters. Notice I can see what's going to happen to the checkout process. And as I mentioned earlier, we can change it. So this is the flow I've defined. This is in code, right? I'm using the old version here, so it's going to play me to update. And here I have the definition of the different fields of that template. You can define different with a form builder. You have different layouts. This is just JSON schema, as you just saw. And you can define additional fields or just by dragging and dropping. You can define additional fields, right? You can either choose the code or you can edit through the UI. So here I'm going to fill in my address. As you notice, the countries here are pre-populated. You can do this by So during the checkout process here, which is in progress, you can define from where to get the data to fill in some certain human field. So I'm going to press next. Notice here is the execution ID of the execution I'm currently on. This is the current cart. Just to be clear, this should be this. Cool. So here, now I'm in the second step. Sorry, didn't mean to have that. Now in the second step, here I'm pulling information from the previous step. I can decide whether to spawn a different workflow that, I don't know, checks the information provided in the first step and does some security step. Everything is for me to decide within the diagram itself. and to present for someone that it's not technical. So personal details, James last. Okay, and here I finished the simple flow. Basically, in the flow, I said whether if it's Uruguay, it needed an extra step because he has an approved discount. But since I chose Argentina, it went from through a different step. So the way this is implemented is basically you have, so each conductor has different type of tasks which are predefined and are pretty useful for most tasks, right? But if you have something specific to do that requires code, you can always use a simple task, which is implemented by a worker, as you could see in the example here. So I'm going to share how this application was built, so you can see that it's just UI, meaning the whole backend is this. So basically, this is a Next.js application, right? I implemented the workers here. You can see that it's just a Lorem Ipsum. It doesn't really hit any database. It depends on variables, and it's just input-output, right? So I just get the input data. I map to a book item, and then it's just faker, meaning I'm faking the whole result. Regarding the components, once I get the execution, I just have an instance of my client, and with this I can get the template that it's going to be rendered. I render this in the screen, and that's it. There's no additional logic in the backend. There's not even an API folder here. You can test and debug the state of your workers, so to know whether they're pulling or not, by going to the queue monitor. Here, if you have a specific task, for example, in our workflow, you had the fake results, right? So I can basically see whether my worker is polling for work. And I can see, like, imagine if this is a production site, I could get stats on which checkout processes finished correctly, which one didn't, by making use of this search API, which you can see how it's how to do here. Other options could have been using a scheduler to spawn a process, a workflow itself, but that's out of the scope of what would be a backend for frontend. Any questions? Sorry. Anyway, basically, that's it. That's what I wanted to show. Hope you enjoyed the talk. Danny?